Good afternoon and welcome to the last in this series, Tax End Year Masterclass. So today is going to be all about business relief. So we're going to look at the strategies, but actually we're going to look at what's typical for normal clients and then look at other ones that you may not have thought about. My name is Dominique Butters and I'm part of the business development team here at Blackfinch. I look after the Southwest. So everything I'm talking about today, you're thinking, oh, actually, this is really useful, or I could do with a presentation to my professional connections or client meetings, do get in contact with your local BDM, or if it's me, brilliant, give me a ring. So important information as usual. These slides are specifically for advisors. If you'd like to use any of them for clients, that's absolutely fine, but come to us first because we need to run it through compliance and get the right disclaimers on there for you. But yes, so just bear in mind, this is for professionals only. We have an additional risk slide these days. What are the key FCA risks or key risks that the FCA would like us to say? You'll notice now with unquoted companies, it will actually have stamped on there, do not invest unless you're prepared to lose all of your capital. Very helpful from the FCA, thank you ever so much. And we'll talk about risk later on because it's actually probably the biggest reasons why advisors don't do this type of planning and clients, because they do get scared of these risk warnings. So we'll look at why we have these risk warnings and then look at the actual product and what it actually does. So learning objectives, this is of course CPDable. So sitting through this, you will get 1 hour of structured CPD. So the first one, we're going to outline the new business relief and agricultural relief allowances and how they work and how you use them to best advantage. Identify when to use a discretionary will trust. So this is when you're talking with your solicitors now. Do people have mirror wills? Do you still want to have those? Because actually there may be an opportunity to reinstate residence nil rate bands, which could be lost otherwise. Identify who, what, where and when to use business relief strategies. So we'll discuss the obvious ones and then perhaps some less obvious ones, and ones again you can use with professional connections. And please don't think they know all of these things because they absolutely don't. I meet with solicitors on a regular basis and even really good ones don't know a lot of this. So please don't assume knowledge. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to look at why there are these high risk warnings on these types of investments and how you can actually explain that to a client. Then you're going to actually understand how Blackfinch mitigate those risks as well and what our track record has been in that. Then we're going to get some boring stuff, if you like, but actually boring but really useful. So things like, well, how do I claim the IHT relief when someone's died? What is the process? And what are the options for clients, or I should say beneficiaries, when a client has passed away? Because again, there's basically every opportunity, one, to keep the funds under management, but two, the beneficiaries are over the moon with all the choices because they can all have different things as well. But for those of you not familiar with Blackfinch, just a quick bit of background here. We're inspired by Charles Darwin and Darwin's finches, how they basically adapted to their landscape, they evolved, and by evolving they thrived. And that's what we're all about. And we're all about adapting to change. And as I always say, you poor advisors, my goodness me, you have to adapt and evolve because otherwise you're never going to thrive, are you? The things that the FCA throw at you left, right and centre, and then you've got legislation, then you've got the budgets, and it's never ending. Good news though is that clients really need you. With all these changes going on, they need advice now more than ever, especially the wealthy ones. And let's face it, as an advisor, that's who you want to see because those are the sorts of people you can help. Blackfinch, we do have over 30 years investment track record in the tax efficient space, and we do have experience across multiple asset investing, renewable energy, property lending, AIM, startup and scale up with our VCT and EIS. And we now have just a smidge under £1 billion in funds under management. And that's around 150 people now spread across the UK, but we're actually based in Cheltenham. We're also UNPRI signatory, committed to responsible investing. So in old language, it's very ESG. We are investing for good. Everything we do, we want to better the environment, social causes, anything you like. And if that's of interest to your clients or to yourselves, do let us know, because we do actually have a policy for each product. More than happy to share those. What do we have as solutions? Well, the one we're going to concentrate on today is the Blackfinch Adapt IHT service. That's the unquoted one. That's the one you're going to get the 40% IHT relief on. We do now have an insured option that's gone live. So if you do have any clients who are wanting to make sure of their cover, they're definitely going to get their IHT relief, even if they die, we do have that insurance cover. It is very good value compared with our competitors in the market. So do let us know if that's of interest. We also have AIM portfolios. Now, AIM is obviously going down to 50% relief. So we are seeing an awful lot of people, if you like, cutting their losses with AIM, because a lot of people have lost money. It's such a shame. Then the relief is halving. So some people are moving across from AIM across to our Adapt IHT service. Just to let you know, we are doing that and waiving our initial charge on the Adapt service. So if you've got anyone who wants to transfer, if they hold AIM with us or elsewhere, absolutely no problem at all. Just get hold of your BDM and say we will do that with no initial charge for you. Obviously, for those still wanting to invest in AIM, we are available on lots of different platforms, and we have both an income portfolio and a growth portfolio. So again, if that's of interest, do speak to your BDM. Our third business relief plan is actually for corporates. It's the Blackfinch Corporate Management Service. And this is specifically for businesses who have too much cash in their company. Now, how much is too much? Well, it's too much if it's surplus, not being used as part of the trade. Now, they might say glibly, oh, I might buy another business, I might buy another property. But unless they have evidence and they're putting that on their, company meeting notes, do you know what? Actually, HMRC says this didn't happen and it's surplus. And if it's surplus, it's deemed as an accepted asset. That's EXCEPT, accepted asset by HMRC, which means it does not get IHT relief through business relief. Now, clients will swear blind it does, but it's in my business. Yeah, don't argue. Point them to HMRC, point to the policy, accepted assets, and they will see very clearly there, yeah, you do not get this unless it is being used as part of the trade. So cash flow's fine. Anything surplus, no IHT. This plan simply gets that money trading, to be quite honest with you. It's very simple, very straightforward. We basically put the money into our IHT service, swap back out for a portfolio of asset-backed loans. They can even choose their loan to value. So if they're very cautious, they can have a very low loan to value. That's treated as a lending trade. IHT relief, normally immediate. So again, if you've got clients or you speak with accountants and you think they might have surplus capital, do speak to your BDM about that one. It's a really neat product, that one. Blackfinch Spring VCT, we did that one 2 weeks ago. That one is basically doing really, really well, but you are buying at quite a discount at the moment because we have to take into account the valuations in the listed market. And overall, the average of tech multiples in those listed companies are down. So we have to reflect that in our VCT net asset value. So you're buying at a bit of a discount at the moment. And we're also doing a dividend, I think it's the 15th of May, for everybody invested this side of the tax year. So we're doing really well on that one. It does help, of course, we have talented fund managers, we have people who sit on the board and open up their contacts, mentor those companies. We also really have benefited from the fact, of course, we didn't launch until March 2020, when, of course, we thought the world was going to end. But with a VCT, you can sit on your hands. Yes, you get cash drag, but actually much better than rushing into investments when actually it's going to be a whole new world. So the Blackfinch Spring VCT, when you compare with others, doing really well. simply because we don't have any of those legacy companies in there, those companies that the other VCT providers were thinking, oh, if I'd known what's going to happen, I wouldn't be investing in these companies. Now, that's not to say we're not going to have any failures, but obviously we're investing in companies in this new world, hence we are doing so well. Of course, also make the most of it this tax year because it's 30% income tax relief, of course, going down to 20% from the new tax year. So do make hay while you can. The Blackfinch Ventures EIS, run by the same team as the Spring VCT. That one, the highlights, if you're in by the 25th of March, we will get you into a diversified portfolio of at least 10 companies plus in this tax year. Tax certificates normally come through by about mid-June. We're very, very quick on those. So beautiful diversified portfolio, invested quickly, which also means your 2-year clock for IHT starts really quickly. And of course, getting those certificates means you get your tax back that much quicker as well. And lastly, some of you may not be aware, but we also have an asset management side to the business. We offer both MPS and what I like to call, technically, an MPS on steroids, which is basically our tailored portfolio service. And that's for those advisors out there, you might be one of them, who actually really enjoys stock picking and you love creating your portfolios, but you might now be concerned that you could be deemed as a manufacturer by the FCA. So this service is those people who say, well, do you know, a standard MPS is all right, but I'd much rather have input. Chat to the fund manager, go, well, can we have more exposure into blah, another technical term, or into Y? And actually, unless you're completely mad, the fund manager will say, yeah, fine. We can tailor it to what you want. And it's true tailoring. So again, if that's of interest to you, do get in contact with your BDM. If you are doing a review of your perhaps existing MPS service, your CIP, and would like a comparison, because you need to do that on an annual basis, give us the opportunity to have a look. Even if it's a tick box, say, yep, what I'm doing exactly right, and there isn't anything better. Absolutely fine. Use us. So on to the main topic. Business relief and agricultural relief assets, or allowances now for those assets. So from the 6th of April, so it's coming up quickly now, we now have new allowances, because of course today it's unlimited. From April, it has gone up. Thank you, the government. I know we have to be grateful sometimes. They have now upped it to £2.5 million per person. And it is transferable now. So somebody could have up to 5 million in business relief assets. That's absolute, or agricultural relief assets, absolutely free of IHT. Fantastic. Much more realistic than that £1 million per person, especially when it wasn't being transferable. Obviously, it's not exactly the limit. The limit is 100% on that first 5 million for a couple. Over and above that, they still get the 50% relief, which actually quite a few clients, I've met quite a few business ones who said, well, it's better than nothing. At least it's half price. So actually, yeah, good point. But a key here, at the moment, it's unlimited. Why is that important? Well, a really good opportunity at the moment is to go and speak to accountants, solicitors and say, look, you've got to be quick here, but you need to refer to me all your businesses or farms which are worth more than 2.5 million owned solely, or over 5 million if held jointly, because there's some planning we could do. Now, you don't care if they do the planning or not. You've just now got in front of a really wealthy business owner or farmer and just think of all the other things they've got. How much is their pension? What about their other IHT? What about the shareholder protection? What about the key managers? It's a wealthy client. But what the hook is, at the moment, say they've got a business worth 6 million. So you're saying, right, your first 5 million, husband and wife, you're fine. 40% saving. That 6 million, you're only going to get half the relief. So actually, 20% tax, that's £200,000 in IHT. It's going to be liable. Would you be willing to give that million away? Now, the answer is going to be yes or no. If it's no, great, put a life policy in place. They say, well, maybe, tell me more. Okay, so they could do an outright gift to son, daughter, fine. The only thing is, of course, divorce, bankruptcy, outright gift, not ideal. So instead, what you could do now is put it into a lifetime discretionary trust. Okay, now that's a chargeable lifetime transfer, but because you're putting in an IHT exempt asset, because they've held their business relief or agricultural relief shares for the last 2 years, they put it in, there's no chargeable lifetime transfer tax. So you're getting in for free. Okay. They live for 7 years. It's done. It's gone. It's finished. You've just saved them £200,000 in tax. Fantastic. If they don't survive 7 years, it's a failed chargeable lifetime transfer, but still in an IHT exempt asset. Now going to get the half relief because they already have their 2.5 million each if it's post-April. So they get the 50% relief. But they might get taper relief as well if they've held it long enough. So it's one of those, it could be worth a go. Now, of course, it is a disposal for CGT purposes, but you can use CGT holdover relief. Again, these sorts of things, do come and chat to your BDM and we can talk in more detail. And we're very happy to present to accountants, solicitors, and companies for you on this. But the main point is they need to do this now. If accountants say, oh, yeah, I'll get round to that, and they don't send you these clients until April, you want to give away that 6 million into discretionary trust. Well, now they're over their 5 million, the 2.5 million each. That 6 million only gets 50% relief. So there will be a chargeable lifetime transfer tax. It's half price at 10% rather than 20. But why pay any tax if you don't need to? And of course, AIM, no change to AIM, that stayed at the 50% relief. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, these are now transferable. So you think, brilliant, we don't have to do anything with wills anymore. However, we need to have a think about it. If we've got smaller clients, okay, maybe worth 2-3 million, it might be a good idea to still give away their business relief qualifying assets or agricultural relief on first death. So have a think about, I'm thinking of the Residence Nil Rate Band. So if we give away something on first death, let's have a look actually without will planning. Let's say you've got business relief assets owned at 2 million, 50-50, husband and wife. Other assets worth 1 million. So they've got a total estate of 3 million. If they do nothing, they've got mirror wills, which most people have, no IHT on first death, second death, total estate's worth 3 million, no residence nil rate bands. However, do a little bit of planning and say, do you know what, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, let's get rid of those mirror wills. Let's now have separate wills, and on first death, let's give away your business relief asset. So they're giving away that first million. Now, not many people want to give away half their business on first death. But the beauty is, if you're giving it away into a discretionary will trust, the remaining spouse can be trustee. They're also written as a potential beneficiary of the trust. So they've got control, they've got access, they've got benefit of the money in that trust. Kids don't actually get anything until the second spouse has died, or unless they choose to do so. But now on second death, they only own that million of their business relief assets, the other half, and the million of the other assets. Their total estate now is 2 million. You've just reinstated their residence nil rate bands and saved them £140,000 in tax just by saying, let's get your wills right here. Of course, you refer that off to a solicitor. The solicitor said, this is amazing, well done, thank you. Can you see my other business clients? Yes, I probably can. Also, you might want to give away not the residence, the nil rate band as well, because that gives them a bit more headroom on assets growing by the time of second death. But it's, again, just a great talking point for those business owners and these farmers. But other than that, who, what, where, and when to use business relief investments? Well, we're going to look at a few of these case studies. First one we're going to look at is business owners who may be looking to sell or have sold in the last 3 years. Since we've had changes to entrepreneurs relief, now called BADA, I like that because it is better than entrepreneurs, business asset disposal relief, a lot of people did sell their business. So there should be a lot of opportunities for you to speak to accountants, solicitors on people who've sold a business. We'll go through that in a second. Power of attorney clients, pretty much hamstrung on doing any other IHT planning, or it's very difficult. Power of attorney, no problem. We'll look at a case study. Elderly or ill clients, can they do 7 years? Don't know. Can they do 2? Probably. Younger clients who can't afford to give the money away or put it into a trust as they require access. Now, this is one you probably don't think about because everyone, when they're doing business, they think, well, old people, ill people, can't do 7 years, might do 2. Let's give it a go, worth a try. But a lot of people forget about the younger ones. Do you know? As you know, younger people die as well and can die very unexpectedly. So actually, business relief planning for them is not about the 2 years, it's about the access and control. So if it's just part of an overall diversified portfolio, okay, it's not exciting. We target 3 to 5% per annum. Really, we're looking to keep pace with inflation. Well, I bet they've got quite a lot of money that they're expecting to do that. So I want to put an IHT shelter over the top of it. They've got access to it if they need it. If they don't need it, there's no IHT. Sort of what's not to like. So don't forget your younger ones. If it works as part of an overall diversified portfolio, why not have a chunk of money basically being sheltered from IHT? Life interest trusts, we're going to look at those as well. What are they? How do they work? And personal injury or disabled trust. Now, this one, these are few and far between, but when you get them, they tend to be very large, normally multi-millions. And these are terribly sad cases. It's normally medical negligence, or it could be a really serious accident, and it's basically compensation. So they get this big lump of money in. They often have money on an annual basis as well, and that's to provide them with an income for life. And it's compensation for their injuries, often life-threatening, reduced life expectancy, those sorts of things. Now, IHT is not a main driver with these trusts. It absolutely needs to be providing an income for life for that injured person. And you will, if you get involved with these, so I urge you to get involved with these. Normally solicitors are acting as the powers of attorney on these. But normally you're going to put together a beautiful, widespread, diversified portfolio using all the asset classes possible. But you can get clever with the asset allocation. Because the trouble with personal injury or disabled trusts, they're great from a taxation point of view while people are alive, because they're deemed, well, they're treated or look like a discretionary trust, but actually taxed as a bare trust. They have their full personal tax allowance, their full CGT allowance, but it's also in their estate for IHT. Now, their family might have been fighting for this payment for the last 10, 15 years. They finally get this lump, and you or the solicitor can say, by the way, you might not be aware of this. And you might, they might not ever find out until they're dead and it's too late, but let's get them before that happens. They have no idea that this lump sum is actually subject to inheritance tax. So there's going to be a massive IHT bill. So what I would say to solicitors, say, look, if you appoint me as your trustee, I'm going to make sure we put together a beautiful, widespread, diversified portfolio. I'm going to use an independent financial advisor to help me with this. but we're going to get clever with the asset allocation because these trust monies do form part of your son, daughter's estate for inheritance tax. So 40% of this money is actually over their nil rate bands is going to be taxed. And at this point, they've fallen off the chair, died, and gone, what do you mean? This is completely mad, because they probably assume it's going to be tax-free. Yeah, tax-free to them, not tax-free as far as IHT goes. So in your beautiful diversified portfolio, you often have investments which aren't linked to the stock market because you don't want stock market volatility. You'll often have some investments in smaller companies because that provides an oomph in a portfolio. Well, why not swap the one which is not linked to the stock market in our Adapt IHT portfolio targeting 3 to 5% per annum? And the smaller companies, well, you could do some AIM. So basically, rather than using an OICA or a unit trust, use those strategies and you've probably got 10, 15% of their portfolio IHT free, or at least relievable at 50% on AIM in 2 years. Then in an ideal world, when you have your annual trustee meetings with the solicitor, probably the parents, you're going to go, what's the life expectancy? How's the health? Because what you can do is move more and more money across to the IHT shelter, okay, into business relief assets. So upon death, everything is sheltered, which is subject to IHT. Now, that's an ideal world, is never going to work like that, but you get the principle. But the main point is you now have a 2 million, 4 million pound trust fund that you're now in charge of, but you are massively adding value and adding value for the solicitor as well, because they want to be the professional trustee. Well, just by those little IHT savings, that'll pay for their fees and your fees forever. So it's a great way of adding value. So let's go on to some case studies. So let's have a look at people who have sold a business in the last 3 years. So you might say, well, what's the relevance of that? Well, to get business relief, you have to be holding a business relief or agricultural relief asset at the time of death and for 2 out of the previous 5 years. So you can have up to a 3-year gap. So if somebody sold a business 3 years ago, they can reinvest the proceeds and potentially some of the proceeds into another BR plan. Okay, so one of our investments, get the IHT relief back immediately. They do not have to do the 2 years again. So they get knocked over by a bus next week, no IHT. Compliance makes me say probably, but probably the best IHT planning they're ever going to do. And when you think about business owners, farmers, when do they sell? Old, ill, retiring. All are key triggers to look at IHT planning, but do they? Do they heck? And that's because nobody's telling them to take advice. You've got the accountant desperately trying to get them their business asset disposal relief and a lower CGT rate. You've got solicitors just making sure they don't get caught up in contracts later on. And they sort of fall through the gap. Also, in my experience, when you meet business owners and you talk about inheritance tax planning, they're not that interested. Why? Because in their head, they think IHT planning is giving money away or putting it into trust. And they're thinking, but it's my money. I want to enjoy it. I've worked hard. Never mind the kids. If they get £2.50 more than I ever started with, I don't really care. And I did meet a chap who was taking actually £1 million out of his business. And he was so funny. So the advisor said, right, so it was protected from IHT in the company. It's not going to be any more. 40% tax, £400,000 potential IHT bill. Brought Dominique along to have a chat about this. Well, it was so funny. He ranted. I swear, he ranted for about 10 minutes. And I sat really quiet in the corner until he stopped ranting. And it was along the lines of, I don't care, my money, I'm going to enjoy it. If the kids are ungrateful, they don't deserve anything. So funny. They get more than £2.50 more than I ever started with, etc. And when he finished ranting, I said, well, that's why I'm here. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, quite right. You should spend your money. That always throws them. You spend your money, spend as much as you like whenever you like. But with this plan, whatever you haven't spent, whatever is left, there's no IHT. Basically, it's a free inheritance for the grandchildren because don't remember, like I always remember, like I always say, they always love the grandchildren so much more than the children. And I also say they could be turn out to be awful drug dealing monsters, and they'll obviously just blame the mother. Um, but of course, you think about that, and I often say I do a lot of presentations to clients, often with solicitors or accountants, and say, look, all you're doing with business relief is choosing who gets the tax, the government or your grandchildren. Which would you prefer? Because the benefit is they've got that access and control. And this chap who hated the idea of IHT planning, when I said, look, you've got access, he said, well, I can spend it. Yeah. Whenever I like. Yeah. And whatever I don't spend is exempt. Yeah. Well, I'll have one of those then. I'll have that. And that's the point. So we immediately think a lot of people aren't interested in IHT planning. It's only because they don't know about business relief. They actually, all they know, giving money away, putting it into trust, I'm not going to have that benefit anymore. And people don't like that because, and I get it, we're all living much longer. We don't know when we're going to die. And as we're living longer, lots more people are going into care and they wanted to go into a nice nursing home. You know, I definitely do. I'm ideally wanting nice meals. I want a spa. I want to be taken out on outings. That's going to be expensive. My money first. Whatever's left, great, that can go to my daughter. And I love her dearly, but my money first. That's the beauty of business relief. They keep access. So, what about powers of attorney? And I mentioned at the beginning, this can be a tricky one. If someone's lost mental capacity and they're under a power of attorney, if they're under the law of England and Wales, you can invest money on their behalf, but you cannot gift money. You can't put money into a trust without applying to the Court of Protection. And the Court of Protection, one, it's time consuming, at least 6 months. It's also really costly. Whenever I present to solicitors, I always say, anyone applying to the court protection? And often there's one. They'll go, I did it once and I never do it again. And they'll tell you time consuming, costly, right pain. And because, of course, the Court of Protection sort of say, well, if that person woke up fully compos mentis the next day, if you've given all their money away, they'll be saying, well, where's all my money gone? So they don't like it unless they've got so much money they couldn't possibly spend that X amount you're thinking of gifting. So generally the answer is no from the Court of Protection to give their money away or put it in trust. But even if it's yes on the odd occasion, that client needs to live 7 years by the time they actually find out. Average life expectancy of somebody going to nursing home is around 4.5 years. So again, for 7 years to be fully exempt, that's going to be a hard one. But the beauty with business relief investments, if that person woke up fully compos mentis, it's in an investment. They go, oh, it's there, I'll have it back out. There's no detriment to them, which is why if you're acting as a power of attorney or solicitors are, they can do business relief investments. Obviously, it's going to be in the client's best interest as well. So you are looking at performance, what they've invested in previously. We can help you with that, build a case, but actually no detriment. So actually, it's a really straightforward one to do. No need to apply to the court. And of course, only 2 years to be relievable. Got 4.5 years average life expectancy, 2 years. Do you think you can do it? When we're talking to beneficiaries who are powers of attorney, they're thinking, we've got to give it a go. It's worth a try. If you're in Scotland or Northern Ireland, then actually you do go to court and you do present to court and you present whatever option, whether it's just an investment or IHT planning. A few years ago now, my colleague was asked to go to court with an advisor, actually. It was quite a number of years ago. And he said, look, can you come with me? Because I'm going to try everything. He said, but you might not know what business relief is. And bless him, he tried a gift trust, a loan trust, a discounted gift, and business relief. The judge literally turned around to him in court and went, no, 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 yes. Why are you bothering me with the other three when you just do that one? Which did make my colleague rather chuckle. But again, it's just straightforward. There's no detriment. Nice and straightforward, that one. Elderly clients, clients in poor health. Well, 7 years can seem a long time. I mean, to be honest, sometimes they're fitter than we are and they still don't think they can live 7 years. But if you say to them, do you think you'll do two? Well, psychologically, it's two tomorrow. And they think, well, I'm not going to die that quickly. Yeah, I can do 2 years. And the other beauty about spouses is that the 2 years is transferable. So say you've got a husband and wife, husband takes out a plan, can be just in his sole name. He lasts a year. On death, that can transfer to the wife, and it's as if she's had it from inception, so only got to do the other year. Now I say, you've got a couple who've lasted till they're 100. The chances are one of them's going to survive 2 years. Again, it's a good bet. Whereas if you're looking at making outright gifts or trusts, you're thinking, oh, which one of you is going to do the 7 years? Because it's not transferable. Business relief, they want you to do it. Don't forget, we have to invest for the good of the UK economy. We're creating jobs. We're creating taxes. That's why you get this tax break. They want you to do it, so they make it appealing. 2 years, access, control. Although don't forget the disadvantage is not just 2 years, it's 2 years and at the time of death. They're not daft. And the access, well, if you ever have it out, is back in your estate for IHT. But as I always say, you're only going to have it out if you're going to spend it. So what does that matter? So 2 years transferable between spouses. If one doesn't make it, actually carries on that 2-year clock. Unless you're going to the insured option, and even the insured option, you're just ticking a couple of boxes. But there's no medicals, no medical questionnaires. It's really simple and straightforward. It is just an investment. They live for 2 years in OHT. If they don't live for 2 years, oh well, was it worth a go? Now, you might have heard this phrase, immediate post-death interest trust, and you're probably thinking, what is that? Well, in the old days, they used to be known as life interest trusts or life tenant trusts or interest in possession trusts. It's basically where someone has a right to an income, or if it's a property, a right to stay in that property. Now, the problem is where they have a right to an income or right to stay in a property, what a lot of people don't realise is that whole trust fund is sat in their estate for IHT, which seems slightly mad because the whole point of these trusts is to actually protect the capital to go down to the children. Normally done with second marriages, husband's got £1 million going, well, I do love the second wife, but, she might waste this £1 million on handbags, shoes. It'd be jewellery in my case. But I want to provide for her. So in the will set up this immediate post-death interest trust. As it sounds, it comes into force on death in the will. The £1 million goes into the trust. She has an income for life, but she can't spend the capital. That million is protected for his children, often from a first marriage. Brilliant bit of will planning. Apart from the fact it is sat in her estate for IHT. Well, you can do trustee investments into business relief qualifying assets. So now you've got that £1 million into business relief assets. If the life tenant, person getting the income, lives for 2 years, no IHT. Because a lot of people don't realise that on this £1 million trust fund, his children are going, oh, when's the stepmom going to die? I'm going to get my hands on that £1 million. Have no idea it's probably nearer 600,000. They're going to be gutted. Yeah. Also, another disadvantage, say this is a second marriage and she's got children from her own marriage as well. Say the trust fund's worth £1 million, she's got an estate worth £1 million. Through apportionment, that trust, even though it's not going to her children, will use up 50%, 50%, because it's 50% of the total estate. It will use up 50% of her nil rate bands. So it means less money goes down tax-free to her own children, which could be deemed as very unfair. So, trustee investment into business relief. 2 years later, no IHT for the remainderment. So if you think about it, that's 600,000. If they're inheriting 600,000, they need to grow that inheritance by 66% to get them back up to that million. So 66% effect growth just by saving the IHT. This million is now not sat in her estate for IHT, which means she has all of her nil rate bands to pass down more money tax-free to her own children. Everybody wins. So again, when I'm presenting to solicitors, who are the ones who mainly set these up, say, look, call everybody in, call in the trustees, call in the life tenant, call in the children remainderment. They're going to think you're absolutely brilliant. Go, well, at the moment, there's a 40% potential IHT bill, but actually, working with this advisor over here, we can get clever and there'll be no IHT as long as you live for 2 years. What do you think? No, we'll go, yes, please, yes, please. It's always the quickest planning we ever put in place because everybody wins. From a solicitor's point of view, they've probably got 5 new clients now that they can do their wills and power of attorney and everything else. But the downsides, there's always got to be downsides, hasn't there? So, why are these types of investments deemed so high risk? FCA, bless them. Well, first of all, is because of the wrapper. And that's the main reason. To get business relief, you have to invest in unquoted or private companies. So, as I always say when I'm doing client meetings or seminars, look, to get this tax relief, you can't just invest in the FTSE 100 or the S&P 500 or Japanese equities, because how is that good for the economy? It's not. If you want this tax break, you have to help the UK economy. So by doing that, you're investing in trading businesses, which are creating jobs and creating taxes. But the FCA will just say, whoa, you're buying a single company share. Well, buying any single company share, even if it's a blue chip company, is deemed as high risk. But of course, being a private or unquoted company, well, that's the same as buying some shares in the butchers down the road. To be fair, that is really high risk, isn't it? Because they're not looking under the bonnet of what we're actually investing in. They just look at the wrapper. This is a single company share, unquoted, not even listed on a stock market. And of course, because it's not listed on a stock market, an official stock market, it should be hard to sell. Go back to the butchers. Actually, how easy would it be to actually sell the shares in the butcher shop down the road? You can have very limited number of buyers for that if you have any. So you can see why, if they're only looking at the wrapper, if they're only looking at it's not listed on a stock market, it should be hard to sell, it should be illiquid. Actually, you can now see why it is deemed as high risk. Okay, so how do we actually explain the risk to clients? Well, you say, first of all, you say, well, unless it was in a private trading company, you wouldn't get the business relief. Okay. If actually our Buckley Trading, which is what we call our trading company, if that was a unit trust or an OIC, with the level of volatility it has, and I have a graph on this next, it has such little volatility, it would be probably rated 1/2 out of 10 on the risk scale. But of course, it's not a collective, it's not a unit trust, it's not an OIC, and therefore we can't just rate it as such. But we have never had a negative period. So think of it from your point of view. If you saw a fund like that, how would you rate it? You wouldn't rate it as a 10 out of 10 or high risk, would you? But because it's not in that wrapper, it's in that private company wrapper, it is immediately deemed as high risk. Come to the stock market point. Well, what is a stock market? A stock market is just somewhere where you match up buyers and sellers. Well, guess what? We've created our own stock market for our own shares. And we have on average between 2 to 10 times the amount of people coming in and buying the shares of those people exiting, dying, withdrawals, etc. So all we're doing is matching up buyers with sellers and obviously creating more and more shares because it's getting bigger and bigger, and we're investing more and more money into other assets. So from a liquidity point of view, we say, look, allow 2 to 4 weeks, but on average, we're taking around 10 calendar days, so about a week and a half to provide withdrawals. And we deal the shares twice weekly. So actually, it's incredibly quick. That's not to say, we couldn't be longer, but that's how long it's taken on average. I don't think we've ever had one that's taken longer than those 4 weeks. So really good track record here. And this is the graph I do love showing clients because this really puts it into perspective. This is on the blue line, our Adapt IHT portfolio over the last 10 years. And so since inception, we've never had a negative period. And then this is AIM. So good way of explaining AIM though, the potential for upside is huge. They would be buying at a massive discount now if this was appealing, but you can see the volatility in AIM. And you can see the lack of volatility is pretty dull. It's a steady eddy in the Adapt IHT portfolio. And that's the one I think would be really useful to demonstrate, yeah, these are deemed as high risk. This is why now look at the performance. So how do we actually mitigate the risk in our Adapt IHT portfolio? Well, one, diversification. But secondly, is asset backed. We're doing things like property development finance, asset backed lending. Average loan to value is around 58%. So you've got 42% headroom there. We only do things on first charge. So, if you don't pay your mortgage, they're going to take ownership and actually sell it on. We're exactly the same. First charge. If they default, we will try and work with them, to be fair. But we have had instances where we have had to take ownership. We have parachuted other teams in to, finish developments, etc. That is what we do. And actually, unless they've got a really low loan to value, we'll often take personal guarantees as well. What else do we do? Main things we do: wind, solar, renewable energy. The government are all over renewable energy, and so they should be. We need to be, standing on our own 2 feet, really, with renewable energy, don't we? We don't want to be dependent on other countries for our energy. So, wind, solar. Do we do all these other technologies like anaerobic digestion, fibre broadband, all these other things, which, not being funny, have gone wrong left, right, and centre? No, we don't need to go into those things because we don't want to take the extra risk. You'll find that we're one of the lowest charged, if not the lowest charged products in the market. So we don't have to take extra risk to actually hit our target returns. We love solar and wind. 2 reasons. One, it's really predictable. Sun comes up in the morning, sets at night, it works. If the wind blows, it works. Really predictable income stream. And because it's predictable, and it's a really steady technology, you can get A-class warranties and insurances as well. So it's really quite dull, but very efficient from an income stream point of view. The other reason we like it is because when you're explaining to the clients, what is this invested in? Lending is nice and easy to explain because they've all had a mortgage. They understand loan to value, they understand first charge. Solar and wind, it's really simple and straightforward. There isn't anything tricky in there for you to try and explain to a client. We've added on a few more asset classes recently, and that's because we're basically preparing for April 27, when all of that tax-free cash out of pensions might need another IHT home. We are expecting an awful lot of tax-free cash to be flooding into business relief plans, and what we don't want to be is caught on the hop and thinking, oh, where are we going to place all this money? Because you don't want a big load of cash in your plan because you're going to have cash drag. Also, you don't want to lose your trading status. So we're preparing and we've got these other trades ready to go to bring in all that extra money. So don't worry about us closing after a month in April 27 because we've had too much money in. We're already prepared. But you can see why we've never had a negative period. It's all designed for risk mitigation. Not saying there's no risk in it, of course there's risk in it, but we're looking to reduce or mitigate that risk as much as we physically can. What I will say is our target return over the medium term is 3 to 5% per annum. Some people say to me, Dom, do you think you'll make 10% in a year? No, we definitely won't. If we're making 10%, something's gone horribly wrong. It's all about capital preservation. Don't forget, it's not just 40% tax we're saving. You're saving the beneficiaries from having to grow their inheritance by 66% to get them back up to where they would have been if they hadn't paid that IHT bill. So modest returns, actually, that's exactly where most of our clients want to be. They want to open their envelope to their valuation, go, that's really boring, marvellous, and put it to one side. They don't want to be worrying about these things. Because let's face it, most people have made enough money and taken enough risk in their lives. They don't need to take the extra risk anymore. And that's why AIM at the moment is not doing as well. Obviously, the market's not doing as well, but actually for inflows, because I think people are thinking, oh, do you know what? I'll just have the steady eddy and the full 40% relief. And who can blame them? So how do you actually go about claiming business relief on death? Okay, so when you're actually adding up the estate and you're listing down all the assets, one of the forms you'll request is the IHT 412 form. And this is unlisted stocks and shares. So this is the form you'd complete. And all you're really doing is naming the shares. So in our case, the Adapt IHT portfolio is not the Adapt IHT portfolio, it's Buckley Trading. Okay, this is all on the valuation statements. Okay, how many shares? What's the valuation? Basically, owned for 2 years, yes or no? Of course, if it hasn't been owned for 2 years, but it's replaced another one, we are doing an awful lot of transfers from some of our competitors that aren't doing so well at the moment. Well, there you would actually write in no, replaced from, and then you'd put those dates as well from where you previously had another BR from what date to what date, because it carries on the 2-year clock. And then basically rate of business relief. Are you claiming 100% relief, or of course 50% now if it was AIM? And it's as simple as that, to be honest with you. And of course, you also put your AIM stocks on this one as well. What are the options on death? Well, basically every option you could possibly want with us. So first of all, could just transfer to the wife, or I should say, I always say wife, wives do die first sometimes. You can transfer to the spouse on death, especially useful, of course, if they haven't done the whole 2 years. So you want to carry on that 2-year clock. But also it might be just the spouse does need access to that money, so they want to actually retain ownership. And if it's a joint one, it'll automatically go to the other spouse anyway. If there isn't a spouse involved, obviously it can go to the beneficiaries. So if they've got an IHT liability themselves, and lots of people do now, because by the time they inherit, they're so much older, they think, well, I don't need it now. I needed it when I was 20 or 30. Have their own IHT liability. They can inherit the shares. If mum or dad have done the 2 years already, the children do not need to do the 2 years. It's immediately exempt for them as well. So again, brilliant bit of IHT planning. So you can say to them, look, you can spend this money if you like, but actually it's free of IHT immediately for you. So let's keep that as your IHT plan. If you need to spend money, let's spend your other money, which is still subject to IHT. Really good. But every family, you'll probably have 3 children. 2 are doing really well, really wealthy, have an IHT liability. Third one, poorer than the church mouse and desperately needs the money. Fine, we can cash those shares in after probate, of course, cash those shares in and they can have those proceeds given to them. So you can transfer some shareholdings to some children, beneficiaries, and you can encash some as well. So it doesn't have to be all or one. Really simple and straightforward. But what if there's an IHT liability still outstanding? And I do feel sorry for you these days because, the threshold's been frozen from, well, forever it seems, and still will be. You're doing so well on investments and property prices are going up and up and up. More and more people are getting caught by IHT. And it's very difficult these days to get rid of somebody's whole IHT liability, and especially April 27 when their pension funds come into it as well. So what if you do have an IHT liability outstanding? Of course, you've got to pay the tax within 6 months of the date of death. Good luck for the beneficiaries trying to get hold of that sort of money when they don't have access to the investments or selling the property from mum or dad. You can use our funds. So say you've got an AIM portfolio or IHT portfolio, that might have done the 2 years, could be completely free of IHT, great. But say you've got a £100,000 IHT bill to pay, you can instruct us with this form and basically say, the executor sign it, please pay my IHT tax bill over here, gives us the amount, we will take it out of the plan, pay HMRC direct. So we can't pay them, obviously, because they haven't got granted probate, but we'll pay the IHT bill. That then releases probate, which means the money is now accessible for them. Because these days, trying to get a probate loan is nigh on impossible, and even when you do, really expensive. So I often forget to tell people that one, but it's a massive, massive benefit for those beneficiaries. Don't have to try and find the money. So that's me. I do want to say thank you so much for attending. The learning outcomes, obviously, I do hope that now you can outline the new business relief and agricultural relief allowances and how they work. How you could, with clever will planning, that's all you need to do, and a discretionary will trust, reinstate someone's residence nil rate band, save them another £140,000 in tax. How much are they going to like you? They can't argue with your fees at that point. Identify the typical clients of who, what, where, and when to use business relief, and saying, don't forget those ones you don't think about. Make sure you tell those solicitors and accountants about them because they're the ones who can pass across those really big clients to you. And I hope now as well you've got a better understanding of why these are badged as high-risk investments, but also why you and clients should not be scared by the badge. Look what's underneath. Look what's actually being invested in. Now, we're all different, so I've gone through what we do. That's not the same as everybody else, so do bear that in mind. And hopefully now you do have a good understanding of how we do mitigate the risk and that track record where we've never had a negative period. And I also hope you can now describe the process for claiming business relief, that IHT 412 form on death, and all those options available for the beneficiaries. Just leave me to say thank you so much for attending. I do appreciate feedback. We always do on these webinars. So at the end of the webinar, don't disappear because a feedback form will come through. It takes less than a minute to complete, but we really appreciate your help and feedback because it really does help us. And of course, if you want a copy of the slides or anything like that, you can request them there and then. So just leave me to say thank you so much again. I'm Dominique Butters. I might be your BDM, I may not. Hopefully you know your own BDM. Of course, Georgia, who's my right-hand woman in the office. If you need us, if you want us to book any meetings with clients, professional connections, just let us know. But thank you very much for attending. And if you have missed any of the other webinars I've done, you can ask for the recordings. Bye for now.